Welcome back everyone to the HWBOT World Tour 2016. Today is the AOCT 2016 Grand Battle, the Amateur OC Tournament here in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. We had the first team battling earlier today, and now is the time for the second team to battle out. They are already starting, but they will be going for 1 hour. So let's tune in to what is going on today directly with Bill Zoid, our guest for this live show. Bill Zoid, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here. Where would I be going? Who would want to miss this kind of epic overclocking action like we see here today?
That is great. Super happy to have you with us today. So we will have an improvement. We will be able to display the score for you guys. So as we said, there is two teams of 2 persons. They both have 4 motherboard, but only 2 kit of RAM and 2 CPUs, 2 screen as well. So they can basically only overclock 2 systems at once. What they will have is for 1 hour, they need to do the best score they can. The best score they can will be summed up. So they have 4 motherboard. They will do 4 scores. They will all be summed up. And of course, the person that will be having the maximum total score will win. We have something a little bit special. You can see on the screen. Someone put a bunch of ice in a bag on top of the cooler to keep it cool.
Rice, not ice.
Ah, rice.
It's just rice. Yeah, if it was ice, that probably would count as extreme cooling. I mean, also, you'd probably have water everywhere in the next couple seconds, so that would not work very well.
That would not have been that clever.
Well, who knows? The system might last like 5 minutes and you get the highest score of the day. After that, it never boots again.
This is quite insane. Like these guys came up with some very interesting way of pushing the system to the limits.
More like pushing the limits on how badly you can mount a cooler, but
I didn't say which limits they're pushing, but yeah.
Oh, do my eyes deceive me, or is somebody actually using screws to attach a heatsink today? Yes, indeed. Down in the bottom left corner, they actually have a mounting system. That is some major progress. We've discovered the use of screwdrivers. Well, thumb screws, anyway. But then again, it's really hard to actually like get an AIO mounted if you don't, you know.
Well, they only mounted 2 of them, huh?
Yeah. Only 2 of them. But the thing is, if you don't use any screws, getting the water block for an AIO to stay put is really, really hard. Like with a normal heatsink, right, on a horizontal motherboard, you put it on, and sure, if the thermal paste warms up, it might slide around a little, but it's not really a big deal. Whereas with an AIO, the tubing will actively try to pull the water block up. So you do need something holding it down properly. And you know, you don't really want to have anything just sitting on top of it since it won't fit in between the tubing properly. And if that water block is really uneven, you're going to get really terrible temperatures. So yeah, they actually do need to use the screws, even if they're going to be using just 2 of them.
Actually, I think that 2 screws will be good enough for the system.
Yeah. I think so too.
So today the team we have here is, if I'm right, team from the match G, that is Plendas Plendus against BNCC L2MS. And they're doing the match G on the 3D Mark Fire Strike.
Prepare for some epic slideshow action because they're going to be benchmarking the integrated graphics. And Fire Strike is, you know, that's like the high-end benchmark from the 3D Mark suit, and then obviously all the higher-end ones are just Fire Strike at higher and higher resolutions. There's also Time Spy, of course, but that's a DirectX 12 benchmark. So in the DirectX 11 series of 3D Mark benchmark, Fire Strike is the heaviest one, and the only way it gets heavier is you make the resolution higher. So it'll be interesting to see how the integrated graphics handle this one. And this one should be much more about graphics, the GPU tuning, than about the CPU tuning, because the CPU can actually handle the physics portion of Firestrike pretty easily since we're on i5s. But that graphics card will be really, really working hard to get a good score in Firestrike. So that'll be interesting to see if any teams decide to just all out on the GPU and sort of leave the CPU stock, or if it pays off to work on both. Because with the way Firestrike calculates scores, at some point having more points in the physics on the physics score, if your GPU score is too low, it doesn't actually do anything for your overall score. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do about that.
Yep, and there's one of the team that is close to us is already benching 3D Mark Fast Track. And here we go. Let's have the slideshow in full out screen. So let's present what is 3D Mark Fire Strike about. So there's different tests, different portion of the benchmark. How these different portion actually influence on which part of the system, Bitzoid?
So you have graphics test 1, which is what we're seeing not run right now at 6 FPS right now. So that's the graphics test 1. That is a really, really heavy graphical workload. So it's great as a stress test. It's also a great benchmark because it is really, really heavy on the graphics card. And it's basically a pure GPU benchmark, this right here. You know, you can run it on a relatively weak CPU, and as long as you have a powerful enough GPU, you're going to get good FPS in it. Of course, at some point, your GPU is going to be so fast that you do actually benefit from a stronger CPU. But generally, for that, you're talking about multi-GPU systems with 2 high-end or 3 high-end or more graphics cards. So, yeah. Then you have GT2. So this is the next graphics test. This one is still very much GPU bound. It is slightly lighter in terms of the heat output, but apparently it scores better from better memory overclocking. So so for your GPU, you have your core clock, your memory clock. So in this case, we have memory clock and system. Well, we have the for the integrated graphics, we have the DDR4 memory. So that's the same memory that the CPU is using. So basically, here, if you overclock the system memory, that'll help the score in this graphics test more than in the first graphics test, and the GPU core has less impact on this one. Whereas the GPU core clock has more impact on the first one. Of course, it's best to have both as high as you can possibly go, because that'll get you the most points anyway. And this one does put out a little bit less heat since it's less bound to the GPU core. So yeah, so like for stress testing, I personally prefer to just take the first one and use that one in a loop. And right now we should be seeing the physics portion. So this is a pure CPU test right now, what we're seeing. And essentially you can see the tentacle octopus. So every single one of those tentacles has physics collisions enabled, and basically the test works by doing calculations on the tentacles colliding with the piping that you see in the scene, and the CPU takes care of those calculations. It is not a good CPU stress test, but it is a good test for, like, physics calculations in game, sort of game style physics calculations. So it's not the heaviest CPU workload ever, but it is reasonably heavy. And right now we're going to be seeing the combined test. And the combined test basically takes what you saw in the graphics tests and what you saw in the CPU test and the physics test, and it puts it together. So we have physics in the background, which unfortunately the system is so slow we're not really seeing much of it. As you can see, the statues in the background were falling apart.
3D Mark crashed.
Crashed. Oh. Yeah, I guess the combination of having the CPU and the GPU maxed out at the same time must have probably too much heat, would be my guess with what happened there.
And
so, well, we'll get a chance to see the combined test again.
we will have the chance to see maybe on the red team. Maybe they will have more chance in making the complete run. So on the right side you have the team that
Yep.
is benching 3D Mark Fire Strike already, and on the left side is they're tuning in the system on another system.
Okay, so it looks like I'm pretty far behind on what you're seeing because I just had the 3D Mark crash come up only just now. Oh well, it still works kinda. Like in terms of my streaming, not the system. It just crashed.
So yeah, you were saying about the tentacle, like the octopus one. That's the one that just finished on the red team. They are now going for the combined test. So let's hope that we can see the combined test on the red team right now. On the left side of the screen, they are in the BIOS of the Gigabyte motherboard. They're trying to define the right settings.
I'm not surprised that the teams are going so heavily on the BCLK because we just saw they had 43 core clock ratio with 108 BCLK, which is fine on the new Skylake platform because Skylake has a totally redone clock gen, so you can actually run really high BCLK relative to past platforms. But the BCLK still, like, it wouldn't be my choice. Like, I wouldn't touch it early. I would usually go with, set my multiplier for my memory and my CPU first, set my GPU multiplier, and then start tweaking the BCLK once I'm already in the OS and have a run in. Because the BCLK is great if you want to, push 1%, 2%, 3, 5, 10% more out of your system without having to restart. When you want really fine increments in performance, that's what the BCLK is great for. I really wouldn't use it as to get my big frequencies. But if it works for them, then it works for them. Everybody different approach to how they do their overclocking.
Indeed, everyone has a different approach to it. We can have a look at the scoreboard. We have the scoreboard that can be up like this. So there's 46 minutes left, and so far we've been watching Plendas Plendus against BNCC L2MS teams. As you can see, BNCC L2MS is the only one that managed to submit a score. They submitted 1157 point on Gigabyte and 1319 on MSI motherboard. So the total point of 2476 points. On the other side of the venue, actually, you have Enjoy OC against Classified Solo at the same time, and they are benching 3D Mark Ice Storm Extreme. That's another test from the 3D Mark series. There's 45 minutes left, so they will have time to submit all the scores they need. You can see the rise trick on the top of the CPU cooler.
See, last I heard, the main use for rice in overclocking was as an alternative for shop owls and the like, because rice absorbs water from the air very well, so you would use it as part of your insulation on LN2. Not that it was particularly reliable, but some people actually went and used it.
It works.
When necessary.
It works in some way.
Yeah, if it works, it works. Who cares?
So let's have a look at all the teams so you can see the overview now. So on the right side of the desk, they're using Gigabyte motherboard and MSI. And on the left side, they're using MSI and Gigabyte as well. So that's quite interesting to see both of the team selected those two motherboard at first. Let's see the red team. The red team at some settings in the BIOS. They are restarting the system. It's now time for them to advance to the next step. wait for the system to reboot, and go launch the benchmark. The red team is the first one into the system. So on the left side, you can see the Gigabyte motherboard being used, and on the right side, you will be able to see the MSI motherboard being used. Let's have a closer look at the frequencies. So, GPU core clock on the Gigabyte motherboard will be a little bit increased. I'm actually surprised that all of them are actually going into the details of the BIOS.
Well, I guess that speaks to the quality of the coaching they received on the first day that they were here. Because obviously it's working for them. We're not seeing many failed boots. We're seeing crashes, but crashes are just part of overclocking. So props to the Jagat OC guys for managing to take completely brand new overclock. Well, rookie overclockers and getting them to the state where they're comfortable using the motherboard BIOS and adjusting RAM timings and playing with the BCLK and everything.
We have the blue team benching Primark Firestrike, while some of the red team is launching the benchmark now. You can see the concentration from the guys. So for this setup, we will be using, of course, the for this benchmark is using the setup on the MSI motherboard and the all-in-one cooler. So let's remove the title so we can see the frame rate. So far we're doing this at 6 or 7 FPS in Firestrike. Primark Firestrike. Don't forget that these performances, this test is made out for heavy load on the system. There's Primark Firestrike Extreme, and Primark Firestrike Ultra. The main difference between them is basically the resolution they render the benchmark. This is super heavy on the system, so of course it's important to keep in mind that they are just running on the Intel HD 530, the integrated graphic processing unit from the Intel Core i7 i5, Intel Core i5 6600K. Going into the graphic test number 2, where the Dark Lord is advancing, being followed by one of his spire, the big octopus. So it looks laggy, that's not from the live.
What?
I said it looks laggy, it's not from the live, it's basically from the renderings, from the rendering workload.
Yeah, if anybody's wondering why everything is stuttering so much, it's not because we have bad internet connection, it's just running this badly. This would be like trying, Firestrike is just a really, really heavy benchmark. You need, to get 30 FPS, you'd need like a mid-range graphics card, and this is just integrated graphics on an Intel i5. So, you can't expect it to run well. So it actually runs like, relatively decently considering that this is integrated graphics. I was expecting a lot worse.
We have one of the score from the blue team, 1,365 points. The red team is finishing the combined test. They will be able to submit a new score. And we got a blue screen from the red team. Thank you, Mr. JetX Gaming. So it's barely doing 2.1 FPS on the combined test.
The interesting thing about the combined test is when it runs properly, you actually get a really nice like cascade of the collapsing rocks in the background. Whereas if you run it on a slow enough system, that doesn't even properly render, as we're sort of seeing in some cases here.
There's some pixel be fighting, but you don't exactly know what's. The score from the red team here is 1,329 points. That will be added to the scoreboard that you can see right now here. So basically, we have Plendas Plendus that managed to submit 2 scores, one on Gigabyte, one on MSI, and they took back the lead with their latest. There's 38 minutes left in this competition. So of course that will be interesting to see what they can pull up on Asus and Biostar. For now, none of them is switching the board. So I guess they will spend another good 15 minutes on the 2 systems, and then they will switch to the next board, Asus and Biostar. Something that is actually completely different from the match number H that is playing on the other side of the arena. They choose Asus and Biostar board at first. That's quite interesting to see. They wanted to do it this way. And here we have again the HDD trick, the hard drive trick that we were explaining a little bit earlier on the stream. This is the hard drive trick, something you can use as amateur to pull down the CPU cooler when you don't want to mount it completely.
Well, it's more just adding mounting pressure to thin out the thermal paste, but yeah, it's supposed to get you better temperature. And also potentially your motherboard when that hard drive falls down. Speaking of various mounting system for heatsinks, I'd actually really appreciate if somebody came out with like a hot swap mounting system. Just because when I'm doing like air-cooled pre-testing or something, it's really annoying when you have several CPUs that you want to swap through, and you spend several minutes mounting and unmounting coolers. Probably nobody has come out with like not necessarily a great mounting system in terms of like mounting pressure, but just something to keep the heatsink in place and not have it slide around, because that's the biggest problem I always have when I just put the heatsink on the CPU and don't actually use the mounting system. It just sort of slides off of the CPU over time. As the thermal paste heats up, it gets more liquefied. And when that happens, your CPU cooler starts running away, and then your temperatures go really crap, and you're like, oh, why is that happening? Oh, the heatsink's not touching the CPU. So yeah, that would be nice if some heatsink manufacturer does some like hot swap mounting systems.
Well, the issue is having
really
hot
nice.
swap, like not hot swap, but like easy swap and easy plug-in back. But it's actually much better than it used to be.
Yeah. That I'll agree. There's like these days from the major heatsink manufacturers, like the mounting systems are really nice. It'd be cool if they standardize them, in my opinion. But I think that how standards work in the world, it's like, there's 5 different competing options. Somebody comes up with another one, and we have 6 different competing standards now. So that's probably never going to happen. But I think something similar to like AMD's clip system that they have for their stock coolers, that would be great if we could see that for something a bit bigger. Obviously, it wouldn't work properly in a horizontal mount with one of the really big tower coolers, like the ones we're seeing the amateurs use here. It would certainly be nice for horizontal mount systems, but I guess there'd be issues with making sure that nobody actually tries to use that in a vertical mounting situation, because that could cause all kinds of issues like bending the motherboard, breaking the CPU, breaking the socket. So
See the one of the team highly concentrated. the blue team, they are actually benching 2 systems, and they are launching now the benchmark again. So here they go. They got a point on the BioStar. So one of the board they're using with the rice on top of it, 1,379 points. While they are relaunching on the second one. Oh, there is artifact on the other one, and there you go, 3D Mark crash. So, by the way, what are the different way that can be that can happen when the 3D Mark benchmark is crashing? What are usually the cause of it?
So if you're getting artifacting and it crashes after a bit of artifacting, it's probably because, you know, your GPU core clock or memory clock is too high and some kind of calculation is not being completed properly, and eventually calculation errors lead to an error so big that the driver just crashes because it can't deal with whatever just happened on the graphics card's end. If you can also see 3D Mark crash in the CPU test, where your CPU will be clocked too high and it'll get unstable and it'll freeze out. Then you get the usual system freezes from too high memory clock, all the normal kind of crashes that you see with any other kind of overclocking. That all applies to 3D Mark as well. But what I've only ever had happen to me with 3D Mark is actually the power limit on a power supply, because 3D Mark's graphic test 1 is really, really power intensive. And, you can actually that was interesting, because basically what happens is your system just cuts out and it just out of the blue, no artifacts, no nothing, and it just stops. And so that's other benchmarks could also do that, but generally other benchmarks don't run as hot as 3D Mark's first GPU test. So I've rarely seen 3D Mark is the only time I've ever seen it happen.
No more battery.
So
That's,
I'd call that unique to 3D Mark.
Oh, we have some very, very bad artifacting on the screen. Oh my god, this is super, super bad. I know, this is when you try to overclock too much, 640 by 480. So they completely lost the driver, basically. That's what happened. So it's like, oh, okay, I give up. I will just go and restart the system. But his teammates, yeah, that was quite impressive.
Still with those really, really high base clocks, though, I'm surprised that they're running such
128. That's quite high.
Yeah.
Oh,
as long as you.
They are back in the system, and it's super, super, super looking super bad, 8-bit colors. So you were saying about the base clock, Benzoid?
Oh my god! Oh, so I just finally got to see the really badly crashed system. That is bad. That is unique to Intel's graphics cards.
Oh, we got a blue screen on the other side. He was helping his teammates, and he got a blue screen at the same time. So yeah, very high base clock. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, no, it's with really high base clock, there's not necessarily any of it as long as you keep track of all your settings, but it's not necessary to run that high base clock in my experience. You'd really want to keep it for tuning, not do everything with it, because you're gonna give yourself unnecessary issues. So we have one team that's to have returned to the 1990s of computing, and the other one just got a.
Oh my god, they still have.
I think I just saw the memory management. I think I just saw the memory management blue screen that you announced a bit earlier. Sucks to be on so much delay, but that's what happens when you try
that's
to
what happened, yeah.
cast from...
Just refresh your player.
Yep, I'm gonna do that. See if it works. So, right now we're looking at, well, at least what I'm seeing is, the guys with the
the
system,
guy with the issue, like the very
with
weird
the colors.
I think
have
they
they tried
basically-
restarting that
Yeah,
yet?
they
or-
restarted. They restarted, but I think they lock it
And it's
too
still
high
stuck.
into the BIOS, and
Oh.
it's stuck in this. They're trying to find which is the right settings for it. They're losing some precious amount of time here.
I mean, they still have almost half an hour. But yeah, you don't want to be wasting time on trying to get Windows to work. Yeah, so somebody on the chat asked what CPUs they're using. Everybody's running i5-6600Ks. So that's Intel's new Skylake. Well, not really new. It's been out for a while, but it is the latest from Intel. The latest unlocked i5 from Intel running on Skylake. It's on the LGA. On the mainstream platform. Well, they don't make any other i5s that are unlocked, as far as I know. So, yeah, and that's on the LGA 1151 socket, if my memory serves me correctly, and it requires...
Screen!
I am not very delayed any longer. I caught that one. That was memory management again, so it looks like somebody's pushing their RAM too far. Or they're having the cache or RAM is broken on that system. So they need to either drop the cache clocks or loosen up the RAM timings or just drop the RAM blocks. One of those three is that's what causes the memory management errors.
On the right side of the screen right now, the team with the rice. The rice team. Rice baby. They actually switched one of the motherboard and they are using the Asus one. It's actually in the BIOS, setting up the system. I'm quite impressed they go dial into the latency and the memory timings. Let's have a look at the scoreboard. So far we have Plendas Plendus against BNCC L2MS. They are both very close in terms of score, like 200 points. 1379 for Plendas Plendus on Gigabyte motherboard, 1365 on the MSI motherboard, so it's very close score. BNCC L2MS was 1157 on Gigabyte and 1366 on MSI. Quite important to note here that the score on the Gigabyte board is quite low. It seems like they didn't manage to push it as much as they expected. And they already switched the motherboard.
So on the chat, somebody asked if hyperthreading helps get better stability. If you have a CPU that has hyperthreading, then disabling hyperthreading will generally let you clock a little bit higher. However, you will also lose a ton of performance in the process if you're doing anything multi-threaded. So generally, it's not worth disabling hyperthreading unless you're doing a single core benchmark or a benchmark that just doesn't use a lot of threads.
That's something as well that we are not having here because they all use the Core i5-6600K that doesn't have hyperthreading.
Yeah, it also plus the i5s don't have hyperthreading here, so that doesn't even apply to these. So you can disable cores on i5s, but we're running 3D Mark, and 3D Mark has a physics stage. That physics stage loves cores, so turning off your cores would just hurt your score. So yeah, there's no sense for this benchmark. If we were running something like, say, SuperPi 30, SuperPi, or some of the really old 3D marks, then maybe disabling some cores could help. With the modern benchmarks, you generally want to have as many cores as possible.
Well, the complete space, like the complete PC DIY space, is going towards more core and a little bit higher frequency as well. The frequency of the GPU here is about 1350 megahertz, and we'll see the first graphic test one on Firestrike. So, Bilzeit, for just the people that just joined us, can you explain what the graphic test on 3D Mark are doing?
So what we're seeing right now is graphics test 1. Graphics test 1 is basically a pure GPU benchmark. It puts a lot of load onto the graphics card, and it just crashed. So we won't even get to see that. But basically it puts a lot of load on your graphics card trying to draw a complex 3D scene with tessellation and all kinds of modern DirectX 11 technologies at 1080p. And I think that's also the output resolution. So 3D Mark renders at one resolution, but it always outputs at one fixed resolution, so that you don't have any issues trying to run the benchmark on, low resolution monitors.
That means you can always run the 4K workload, even if your system doesn't, your monitor doesn't support 4K.
Yeah, you can run 4K Firestrike on any monitor that you can pretty much hook up to HDMI. Well, on any DirectX 11 graphics card, you should be able to run 4K Firestrike regardless of your monitor choice, though I do believe some of the super low resolutions might not work. So yeah, but basically, so the graphics test just renders a really, complex 3D scene. And it stresses your graphics card. Then there's graphics test 2, which stresses your graphics card again, except it uses slightly different DirectX 11 technologies that are a little bit more biased towards memory bandwidth instead of GPU core calculation speed. And then we have a physics test, which will, when we get to a physics test, you'll see what that is. Basically, the physics test calculates a bunch of... it basically does a bunch of math. Yeah, it does a bunch of collision calculations on some 3D objects, and that all those calculations run on your CPU. It is multi-threaded. It'll scale up to 20 threads. That's the most threads you can have on a consumer CPU. I think it'll scale way beyond that as well, but I've never seen anybody run it on super high core count CPUs and test how it scales that far. So I'm not sure how well it scales beyond 20, but I know up to 20 threads it scales perfectly well, because we have the i7-6950X with 20 threads, and it has a massive advantage over the 5960X, which has a massive advantage over, say, a 5820K, which obviously beats a 6700K or 4790K. Those are both 4 cores with hyperthreading, and then there's the i5. Which the i5s also get beat by the 4 cores with hyperthreading, so it is a very heavily threaded physics test, and it's not the heaviest CPU load ever, but it is pretty heavy, so you can't just run it at stupid high clocks expecting it to work. It puts out a decent amount of heat, and it certainly tests the performance of your CPU very well. And then at the end of that, we have the combined test, which takes everything from the graphics test and everything from the physics test, puts it together, and basically makes your system not run, because it is just so very heavy.
That's the slideshow, I would call it.
Yeah, that's the one which on these systems is starting to approach the seconds per frame measurement unit instead of frames per second. So you get to count between the next frame rendering. So yeah, but the last test basically hits your CPU and hits your GPU really, really, really hard.
So on the left side of the screen, they are benching 3D Mark Firestrike, but on the right, on the BioStar board, if I'm right, on the right side, they're trying to dial into the Asus board. Of course, they are having the their own preference on which one they will try to use and tweak. But if you look at the guys, that's the two guys on the right side, and you know, while the benchmark is running, because there's nothing else you can do doing inside the benchmark, they are helping each other on setting up the system. So let's focus on one complete run. They reduced the core clock speed from the IGP to 1300 megahertz. They were trying to run at 1350 and it crashed. So for this one, it seems that it is still working. Of course, this is producing a lot of heat on the CPU. They use their own CPU coolers. That team we are watching, the blue team, choose to not fix to not use the official fixation for the CPU cooler. So that means they will have the ghetto mode of the cooling solution, while the red team did choose to use the official mounting system, even though they only put 2 screws out of the 4. So the physics text is now finished. The octopus collision thing, and now we have the combined test. The slideshow is about to start. We can almost count the frame at the same time. Right, let's go it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. You can barely count the frame at the same time. It's crazy. It's going a little bit slower than before. It used to be at around 2.0 score just before, and it was at 1.9 before going back to 2.0. So maybe about, that's it, like 1,171 points. This is far 200 points away from their actually score on the previous board. So they will submit that score. That will give them a third score on the ranking. And once this will be ready, they will have a nice advantage on the scoreboard. You can see Plendas Plendus scored 11,671 on BioStar just now. The Gigabyte board at 1379, the MSI board at 1365. That gives them a total point of 3,915 points. Of course, they still have one board. They still have to do a score on the Asus one, and there's only 16 minutes left. Something that is quite impressive is the guy.
BNCC.
Yep.
What? No, you can go ahead. You can finish.
And BNCC did not add score on Asus and BioStar yet, and one of the guys from that team is still pushing on the Gigabyte one.
Alright, so what's the other guy doing if one of them's still pushing the Gigabyte? Because somebody needs to take care of the BioStar and the Asus. Even if they just get, stock runs, it puts them at an advantage against Plendas Plendus, and it, puts pressure on their opponent instead of them right now being pressured to actually put out some decent scores.
So on
Yeah,
the top,
especially considering
left of the screen is the guy from the Plendas Plendus on the BNCC team using the Gigabyte board. On the bottom left side, they switched for the BioStar, so they will be able to submit a score on the BioStar any pretty soon. Don't forget, guys, if we manage to have 3,000 followers today, we will do a giveaway on the live chat. The last person that did follow us are StickyMan SA8 and Shadow of Umbrian. Thank you guys for the follow. I will give a personal shout out to any of those people that follow us today. This is how we want to thank you guys for doing it. So what we have here on the screen is the render test from the GPU system. What it will help is to have the regular frequencies on the GPU to be triggered. So basically, when you're not running 3D workload on the graphic system, it will not run at the maximum frequency. It will just run in some default low-end frequencies. And not sure if you guys saw it, but there was something called thermal throttling when it was running the render test. Maybe we'll see it again. It's in XTU in the. Right, it was in XTU, and it was throttling at about 20%. So that means it's too hot to sustain the complete load of the system.
Well, what cooler is on the system? Is this the rice cooler?
Blue team, yes, that's the rice
cooler.
Whoa,
whoa, whoa! They're running way too hot. Which scores is this? Which scores has this system put out? Because I'm strongly suspecting that their combined test must be so low because they're throttling so hard. Because the combined test is physics and graphics, right? And your CPU will throttle really, really, really hard if it gets too hot, which will just destroy the physics part of the combined test. Oh yeah, you really, really want to manage your thermals for 3D Mark because it runs really, really hot. It's one of the highest heat out benchmarks you can actually run for a whole system, so running high temperatures, yeah. I think
the blue team I think is having some trouble with that, yeah.
Yeah, because running high temperatures for 3D Mark and getting throttling, like, you'd probably be better off running at a lower clock with safe temperatures, but then again, it depends on what kind of cooling system they are on, because, you know, they might not be able to do any better than just live with the really high temperatures and the throttling. So, yeah, I'm still interested. That's the Republic of Gamers motherboard that has the heat issues, right?
Yes. I think he's trying to clock it too high.
Because I'm trying to figure out which heatsink that is on it, and I can't remember what's on the ROG. That's the rice one, isn't it? That's the one with the sack of rice on top of the heatsink. That mounting system must, yeah. Because an i5-6600K is not hard to cool. Even, you know, these CPUs aren't delidded or anything, but they shouldn't be having this much issues with a. What?
They are. The chips are deleted.
What? Oh, they're delidded. Yeah, then it's even worse.
All deleted with thermal gravity, yeah.
Yeah, then it's even worse that they're having such massive thermal issues. Yep, it's the rice cooler. So what you see here is the sack of rice on top of the heatsink. That's there to improve the mounting pressure, and obviously it's not working well enough to prevent the thermal throttling. So yeah, I suspect if they had proper mounting, they wouldn't be having all those thermal issues. So yeah. And here you see why it's important to have proper mounting, and arguably, you know, with how much time they're spending with no scores, you know, if they just spent, you know, the 2-3 minutes that it takes to mount the heatsink properly, they might be better off now, because they wouldn't be fighting with constant system instability and constant throttling. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's only 10 minutes left in this match. Match G, and we're seeing Plendas Plendus against BNCC L2. These two teams are local amateur Indonesian teams, but what is important is they're having fun doing it here. What we are watching, if you're just tuning in on Twitch.tv OverClocking-TV channel, what we are doing here is extreme overclocking. So basically, the people take a system and they try to push it to the maximum they can within the limitation they have. Right now, the limitation they have is about the cooling solution, because it's super hot here, and it's going to be super difficult for them to find the nice balance between temperature and the performances that they're trying to achieve.
Am I seeing correctly? One of the red teams seems to have some serious graphics instability, but That might just be the stream being blurry on my end.
Like both of the team are unmounting the system. So you can see on the top left, you can see on the top left, you can see on the top left of the screen that is quickly unmounting the system. You have less than 9 minutes now to change the CPU.
Wait.
Change the CPU on the from the motherboard to build the next the next one.
I'm surprised that guy actually ran a mounting system. That's a first. Well, along with Mr. AIO here. So we have. So could we get scoreboards, and also which team is on which side, so we can correlate the scores to the cooling system mount.
So Plendas Plendus is the blue team, BNCC is the red team. Plendas Plendus is the red team, and BNCC is the blue team.
So, yeah,
the BNCC are the guy Rice.
Yeah, I figured that out. I connected it. Yep. That Rice is not working out for them because they're still down by a one score, and they only have 7 minutes left.
They have the two systems running, but that's gonna be difficult for them. I mean, they are still in the lead, but what can happen with the other team? Well, they're like the blue team are both benching right now, so they might be able to submit a score. They need to submit a score on the Aziz board, and they got a score on the Aziz board. 1,389 points. So this is it. They will have it. So
wait, BNCC got.
Plendas Plendus got the score of 13.89. But actually, Plendas Plendus is the one with the rice.
On the Aces. Wait, what? I thought NCC was running rice.
Yeah, that's what you just said. That's the opposite truth.
Yeah, that's actually the yeah.
Yeah, Plendas Plendus just proved
So we
that
should
you should use
okay,
proper
the
mounting.
rice team.
Wait, what?
The rice team. The NCC is trying to, like, one of the contestants trying to mount the system on the Aziz board, but there's only 6 minutes left.
I mean, even getting a stock run could potentially be good, or maybe they decided that they know the Aces BIOS so well that they're gonna whip out a score in 5 minutes. But I'd say I know Aces BIOS pretty well, and I wouldn't try to do a score in 5 minutes unless I was going for some super safe overclock and running unnecessarily high voltages. So that's probably not going to pay off, you know, putting off the overclocking.
Yeah, there's one good reason why the BNCC team did not submit score on the BioStar. That's the system with the weird colors. That's the one you can see now on the screen with the weird colors. This system is having some issues, so they are uninstalling and reinstalling 3D Mark to see if this helps or not. So that's the reason why they did not. Oops, I would rather not show the keys. They did not submit a score on the BioStar. There's 5 minutes left, and they are just finishing mounting their 4th motherboard. So they need to get a score for this one. That will be very difficult for them to get back into the battle. They need to have this motherboard, they're mounting the Aziz one, to do a score in the next 4 minutes, and they need as well the BioStar one to do a score in the next 4 minutes. This is, like, I wouldn't say impossible, but very challenging.
I mean, who knows? They did get to use these motherboards, you know, yesterday. So maybe by some miracle they're able to pull out a good overclock in 4 minutes, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Don't forget they are amateur. Just a few days ago they did a news about all these overclocking things.
Well, I mean, they're very advanced for amateurs with, you know, messing with RAM timings already. So you know, if they don't decide to, if they do something like 4.5 gigahertz CPU clock, throw XMP on it, and then just max out the GPU clock, then we could still get a very, very nice score, and it shouldn't take too long. And they don't even necessarily have to max out the GPU. They just need to get a good GPU clock to get Firestrike to run properly. And we're seeing more innovative mounting systems with orange box on top of heatsink to get pressure.
Their opponents are running both the benchmark now. There's 3 minutes and 15 seconds left. That would be super difficult for them to catch up. Let's see. Is it to the BIOS setting at? Let's focus on him. So he's into the BIOS. You have 3 minutes left to get the system, make it run, get a score. So even though it's gonna be super difficult for them to achieve a score, they will be running it. Important to note that finally the BioStar, the guy on the BioStar motherboard is able to launch the benchmark. So there is maybe a chance. There's maybe a chance if they both run the benchmark before the end of the timer, the score will still be valid. Here we go. 2 minutes 26 seconds left.
I feel like again this whole contest is coming back down to, you know, allocating your time properly. Though, of course, in the first match we saw that one team had a dead motherboard, so you know. But I still feel it'll mostly looks like the most important part here is not so much your ability to clock the motherboards really, really high. It's more about being able to clock all of the motherboards as quickly as possible to something decent, instead of spending lots and lots of time trying to max them out.
So here we go. The red team is the last chance for them. 1 minute and 42 seconds. On the right side, it's benching on the BioStar board. It seems to go through all the tested. That should be okay. But on the left side is using the Asus board, and they just switched the board less than 10 minutes before the end. That means they just have 10 minutes to mount the complete system, make the tuning in the BIOS, and get the system running. What we have now is 1 minute and 20 seconds left. Is going back into the BIOS. It didn't manage to boot. He's trying to boot at 4.2 gigahertz, if I'm right. So 1 minute and 10 seconds left for this match E between the Plendas Plendus and BNCC L2MS. For now, Plendas Plendus is far in the lead. They obviously have 4 scores and improving their score all over. The guys from the BNCC team are struggling. There's less than 45 seconds left now. They need to make the system boot. They need to have the system starting and then launch the benchmark. That's gonna be super tight for them.
Somebody almost just for their CPU 1.7 volts. You do not want to do that on stock cooling. It's not going to necessarily instantly kill your CPU, but leave it on at that voltage for too long and you really won't have a CPU.
Here we go, he's into Windows. You have 4 seconds left to launch the benchmark. He will not make it, I guess. No, it's too late. He won't be able to launch the benchmark. And the countdown is over now. So the BNCC team is having one last chance to score. That's the benchmark actually running. $1,217 points. That's an improvement on the score. That's an improvement of the score, but they do manage to only have 2 scores out of 4. This is the almost the final ranking. Just gonna have the updates. There you go, the 3rd score. So there you go. Finally, they only managed to do 3 scores out of 4 in the end of this match. They get a total number of points of 3,750 points. Their opponent on the other side managed to be quite consistent. If you look at the score, on Asus 1392, on Biostar 1197, Gigabyte 1379, and MSI 1365. So my take on that is that they didn't want to spend that much time on the Biostar motherboard. They might were running into some issues, but their opponent team managed to do more than 1200 points. So this means that, of course, the board can do better than what they did. If you look at the score, 1392, 1379, 1365, this is quite consistent. You know, it's usually above 1365 and below 1395. This is something what you can expect when you have the IGP from the Intel Core i5 6600K that is clocked around 13 MHz on the GPU core, and you have a C15 at around 3 GHz on the memory as well. That is something similar that you can have of these kind of scores. Of course, the Rise team is the winning team for today. They are quite proud. See, they're smiling to the cameras. Yes, you guys made it to the next step. Congratulations. So here we are, the match are over, the scores are final, and we have from the match G that we did follow all along this hour between Plendas Plendus against BNCCL2MS. The winner is, of course, Plendas Plendus. They managed to score 4 scores in this match rather than their opponent that managed to only do 3 scores. The team H, the match H that was actually going on the other side of the arena was based on 3D Mark Ice Storm Extreme, and it was saying Enjoy OC team against Classified Solo. The score was super tight, and we were actually hearing a lot of them cheering out and like beating the scores one after the other. So that was quite fun to still be at the venue and enjoy this kind of enjoyment in there. But in the end, Enjoy OC is the one going further. We will see later on today what they can do. Of course, all the matches from the amateur are done today. So we will see Plendas Plendus against Enjoy OC in the match J, and that will be on 3D Mark 11. So that's not going to be the next match right after this one. There's going to be one later on today. So don't forget, if you like what you're seeing and want to see more of the matches, don't forget to give us a follow on Twitch. And once we're gonna have 3,000 people following us on Twitch, we will be doing a giveaway on the stream. Bilzoid, what will be your highlight of this past hour of the guys benching these 4 different motherboards?
The rice on the cooler, and that it's a unique way to mount a heatsink. That's sort of interesting to see, and it was also actually successful. This match just confirmed that really this is more about getting 4 scores than getting really high scores, because if you're missing that 1 score, you're just not going to catch up. There's no way you're going to catch up. There's not that much there's not that much difference between a super high clock and a the limits on these systems are too low for you to be able to push that much further with a lot more time. So yeah, it's more about the teams really need to get on top of their strategizing of what to bench, when to bench, which scores to get. And I'd actually say there'd be a good reason to maybe try do something where you bench all 4 motherboards as fast as possible instead of spending too much time on each individual motherboard. Then again, they are amateurs, so they take longer to get through the boards. Yeah, very very interesting match nonetheless to watch, especially with the drama at the end about getting those final scores. Yeah.
That's something we like to see. But you say the time management for the overclockers here, the amateurs, like we have to choose between the different board, etc. This is the exact same issue we have with the pro overclockers, like the professional one, the guys, the extreme and elite. When you have different benchmark along a competition and a set fix of time, some of them will spend a lot of time on the one benchmark and will struggle with the time they have left on the few different benchmarks that they have. So that's something we have seen in the past 10 years in competition, in overclocking competition, because yes, it's been about 10 years that there is competition, or at least battles for it. We're being joined here by Xiala. How was the
Hey,
game
guys.
for you?
It was good. So I took a break at some point. I ran out of battery on the transmitter. But no, otherwise it was quite interesting. I think it was so much more nicer to have both teams having all their 4 motherboards and making their choice for which they would, or at what point they would actually change and go to the next ones and spend more time on on one thing or on the other. Yeah, other than that, the rice cooling was quite a funny fact of the
Do you
match.
think it was white rice or brown rice?
I think
or
it
white
was
rice?
I think it was white rice, and yes, they eat mostly long rice here, so the
Mhm.
type of the rice. So I think that's what it was. I didn't open the pack to check the exact specifics. Nonetheless, it was not working that great cooling wise. It seemed it was not. The mounting was not that good, and I think like Benzoid you mentioned, it's worth taking those extra minutes at the start to mount your cooler properly. I really don't understand why they want to save a little bit of time. It's the same, with the AIO and only 2 screws. I mean, really, like tightening all the 4 screws with a screwdriver on an AIO probably takes you an extra